Previously on board.
What have you been up to for the last 33 years?
Well, I was very lucky. I retired sort of early 80s, and within a couple of years, I was approached by the BBC, which is the television company that runs the rugby and sport in our part of the world. So I worked on a semi-contractual basis for them, covering all rugby matches all over the world, especially in Europe, in the 5 nations in those days. Now the 6 nations. I've done 20 years of radio for them, written for some newspapers. Generally worked as a representative for a brewery company.
Oh, nice.
I know I've been involved in sport with my local authority, where I've never moved from where I live in Llanelli, which is in West Wales, for the last 20 years, just about hanging up my boots at the moment.
When I went overseas after I finished school, I went and bought a Llanelli jersey just because
Llanelli, son.
Yeah, I like the name, and I thought it became harder and harder the more beers I had to pronounce it.
Now,
Yeah.
Phil, I have the pleasure of having met you, as you know, in 1982 when I actually arrived at your sports shop. I was working in the UK then, and the first thing when I arrived in Wales, I said, "Where's Llanelli? Because I want to visit one of my heroes," despite you playing for the opposition in 1974. Incidentally, I watched all those games that you were involved in, but it was an absolute pleasure to meet you in your sports shop, and I just look back with absolute fond memories. And although you were the opposition, undoubtedly that halfback pairing between you and Gareth Edwards, who Darren did chat to on Balls Visual Radio last week, was had to be a halfback pairing. It was the world's best as far as I'm concerned, and I guess when you look back to that particular series, you look back to it with absolute fond memories.
Yes, Gareth was great, because he had partnered the great Barry John, who retired in about 1972 to victory out in New Zealand. And then I think probably Gareth was at his peak in 1974, both as a rugby player with his fantastic brain and his great running abilities. And it indeed was a pleasure to play with Gareth on that 74 tour. But I'm sure Gareth would be the first to admit we were very lucky. We were captained by a great man called Willie John McBride. We had a wonderful pack of forwards, so we had a great platform to play off. They were magnificent up front, and you don't go to South Africa and win the series unless you beat the Springboks up front. They beat them up front. We had people then like JPR Williams, JJ Williams, Andy Irvine, etc. And one man, Ian McGeechan, who was such a talented centre, went on to become a great British Lions coach. I think coached the Lions on 5 occasions, which is absolutely incredible. But very happy memories of 74. A long tour, a hard tour, but in the end successful.
I wanted to ask you, Phil, if you look back on that tour of 74, besides the win, what was the highlight for you? What stood out?
I think the highlight for me, I'd been to South Africa in 72 with my club, Llanelli. We went there in our centenary year for about, I think it was 4 to 5 weeks. The highlight for me was on a Lions tour, you had more time to spend in the various towns. So we could, for instance, I think we visited Johannesburg on 4 different occasions, Cape Town on 3 different occasions. But it was going out into the country to the smaller towns, little towns that come back to my mind, Bethlehem and little small towns of that nature, and meeting the people really, and having the time to spend meeting the South African people. And it was absolutely brilliant. And of course, when you go to New Zealand, which is another rugby mad country, the weather can be a little bit tribal at times, very much like Wales, quite wet, quite windy. And I must say, in South Africa, I don't think we had more than 4 or 5 days throughout the whole tour of bad weather. So being paid, going out there, being treated very, very well, and being treated like a true professional in many ways. We were still amateur in those days, and you think back home, of all your friends back home are working in factories or working in businesses, and there you are representing the great British Lions in a wonderful country.
Speaking of the British Lions in 1974, where you scored 103 points, it had to be one of your most memorable tries in Pretoria, when you actually ran all on your own for 100 meters to score there under the post. A career highlight for you?
It was a strange moment in my life, really, to be quite honest. To win a test match in Pretoria, the second test, it is vital. You're playing, at sea level 1 minute down at Cape Town, then you're up at altitude in Pretoria, and it was strange. Yeah, it was a great highlight, a wonderful moment for me to score the try. But I can always remember when I beat the last defender. I'm not sure the gentleman's name. I think he was a doctor playing at full back. I can't quite remember his name. And as I went past him, he accidentally stuck his boot there, and sudden sharp went across my ankle. And I thought, God, that hurt. I scored the try, limped back, and then when I looked, there was a huge hole at my ankle, and blood was pumping out everywhere.
Wow.
And I thought, my God. And I can remember, I thought, this is off for me, I'm going to go. And I remember Willie John coming over and saying something like, it's only a scratch, get up and don't be a baby, or something like that.
Yeah.
But it meant that it did knock the rest of my toe, because I didn't hardly play between the second and third test. I had stitches in the ankle. Also, I'd picked up a knee injury in that game. So really, I didn't do a lot of kicking towards the latter part of the toe. But hey, to score a try in Pretoria, who can top that? So what's a cut to mourn about? You know, it helped get a famous victory there. So that was wonderful.
Well, knowing what we know today, and how rugby players are sort of protected when there is an injury, you'll probably find that the injury that you had back then would have sidelined you for 6 months today.
Well, it was funny, really. You know, that's how amateur we were. We had doctors, of course, who came to the matches, but the gentleman who sewed my ankle up was our reserve hooker, Ken Kennedy. He was on the tour. He was a doctor. He did it in the dressing room. He said there's a hell of a cut there. So, and you know, they were trying to stop the cut from weeping all the time, and doctors were giving me creams and powders. And the one simple thing that cured it, down in Port Elizabeth one day, somebody said, go into the sea, let the salt water get into your cut, and all of a sudden the cut just dried up completely, and it was brilliant, you know. But no, you know, we really were amateur, and the big thing was, as I said, when you've got a captain like McBride, and he says, I need you, I want you, you know, I want you to play, and you just got up and played, really, to be honest. It was it was a pleasure to be part of those boys. And the big thing, and I make a huge point of saying this, it was just not the 15 or 16 players who played in the 4 tests. It was the whole party of 30. And when Clive Woodward went out to New Zealand in 2005, he picked his kind of first team and he picked his second team, and he kind of split the party. What Willie John and Sid Miller ensured, there was no 15 and then a midweek team. There were 30 players fighting for that test spot every week, every Saturday, the big game. So we were a party of 30 players who stuck together, and I think that was the making of the tour.
Sorry, Johnny. And what kind of bond still exists between the players today? Because as you mentioned there, it was a very close-knit group, and I'm sure that firm friendships were forged.
Do you know what is incredible? In about to give your listeners an idea, in about 6 weeks' time, almost coming up Wednesday, the 31st of October, my little town where I live now, Llanelli, we played the great All Blacks, who I think are probably one of the greatest nations, if not the greatest nation in the world. And my little town, Llanelli, beat them 9-3. Now, we've got a dinner on the same day, the 31st of October, 40 years ago, to commemorate that dinner, and we've sold 1,150 tickets at our new stadium at Parc y Scarlett to come to commemorate the game. There's a famous singer in Wales called Max Boyce coming down. We've got famous stars, and then everybody's saying, then I'm talking to Willie John McBride, and it's very sad. The very next day, we're going to a memorial service in Swansea, which is 10 miles where I'm sitting from now, and we're paying tribute. There's a memorial service for a great player on that tour who passed away some months ago, the great Mervyn Davies, the number 8. There's a memorial service. So Willie John and all the boys are coming down for that memorial service. But then they're all saying, goodness me, in 2014, how are we going to celebrate 40 years from beating South Africa for the 74 Lions?
You could have a braai.
We've got to have a function now in Edinburgh. We've got to have one in Dublin. We've got to have one in Cardiff. We've got to have a couple in London. And I'm saying to the lads, we'll be alcoholics by the time we do these functions. But that's rugby for you. And the friendship, the bonds are still there. And as sad as it will be to say so long to Mervyn or have a memorial service to him, then life goes on, and we'll have a few beers that day, and then celebrate the 74 victory in 2014.
Yeah, well, you took over from Mervyn Davies, of course, and Phil, you've been quoted in that pre-game pep talk before facing England in 1977. It's a brilliant, brilliant quote. Look what these bastards have done to Wales. They've taken our coal, our water, our steel. I'm sure you still have a good laugh at that.
I tell you, I was speaking somewhere the other day in a big dinner. I think it was a sort of the north of England, and there was about 500 Englishmen in this dinner. And the compere did me a brilliant favour by reading it, and that tonight's speaker is Phil Bennett, and he said those very, very words. So I got off to a really good start that evening. And I said, getting out of it, it wasn't me who said it was Gareth Edwards who said that. And so the crowd on my side, no. It's funny, everybody in the UK, Five Nations, they all want to beat the poor English, If you ask the Scots, they're desperate to be England. And when you played for 2 seasons as captain as I had, to try and inspire men like Gerald Davis, JPR Williams, JG Williams, Gareth Edwards, the Pontypool front row, you've got to come up with various things, and apparently I said those things on that occasion. But I've lived to regret it in some of the functions I've gone with great pals in England, I can assure you of that.
Yes. Phil, tell us what you spoke earlier a little bit about your commentary career. Are you still involved with commentating at all?
Well, I did quite a bit last year. I did the 2 internationals. We shared it around now, which is only right. I did England away, which was brilliant for me at Twickenham. Met up with Will Carlin and a lot of the present English, or just finished English players. A couple of Welsh lads. We had a great afternoon there. Did the game for radio, and then I met a great pal of mine called Fergus Slattery, Irishman out in Dublin. So I did the 2 internationals there. But it's like everything else in life, I've been very privileged. I've had 40 years of doing this radio work, TV work, and now younger men come onto the scene, so you bow away gracefully, and you say, you never say, like, oh, why am I leaving? And you get bitter. You just say, thanks for the memories. It's been wonderful that I've been able to travel the world with you, with the BBC. Thanks for giving me the chance, because when you finish playing rugby, there's a great void in your life, and that filled in for me, and it was almost like a second career in sport, and I was very grateful, and I'm deeply grateful that I've worked so long with such a great company.
Well, we're speaking to Murray Walker at 3:30, and I was saying earlier, when you think back and you think to Formula One in the in the 80s, probably in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you think of Murray Walker, and if you think of rugby, up until a few years ago, you think of the voice of Bill McLaren, and I'm sure you had the privilege of working with him.
Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful man, and a great Scotsman. Loved the borders of Scotland, the Hoyks, the Melroses, the Galashiels, that part of the world in Scotland. I was lucky. Bill, you see, did it for the national BBC, so he would be doing it for the whole of Great Britain a game. I would be doing it for BBC Wales, so I'd be with another commentator. But I was privileged to work on, say, 4 or 5 occasions with Bill, and he was incredible. The stats, the figures he had in front of him, the members of the family each player had, where he was born, etc. But not that. He was a kind man, and he had this great compliment of he could criticise a player, but in a nice sort of way. He never slated him badly that would hurt his family, perhaps. And he was truly, truly a great man. I was privileged to go up to Edinburgh to speak in a Bill McLaren tribute dinner, and I'll tell you, the place was ram-jam packed, all making an effort, all busting to get into that dinner just to pay tribute to, I would think, one, as you say, Murray Walker, you Peter O'Sullivan's a great horse race guy, gentleman, Bill McLaren in rugby, many of those great men of that era, and certainly Bill is up with the very, very tops.
Well, you talk about legends of the game, and I don't know if you knew this, but the Wanderers Club here in South Africa is celebrating its 125th anniversary this year, and the man in charge of interviewing and emceeing the evening is our voice, well, I like to think our voice of South African rugby, Hugh Bladen.
Yes, of course. I've listened. It seems I've been listening to Hugh for forever and ever, and
I think we all feel that way.
Yes, a great name in South African rugby, and a man with dignity and with pride, and comes over well, when you talk about 125 years, I was lucky enough I've been back to South Africa on about 8 occasions, and the great thing for me is when I came back to watch the Lions in 2009, it was in Cape Town, I had to go and speak at a lunch, and what was wonderful, there was 1 or 2 tables of ex-Springbok captains there, and I had a great pal of mine, Roger Young, who was a British Lion in, I think, 68 in South Africa, now settled in South Africa as a dentist and in property. And, to meet those kind of men and look back, and we tend to exaggerate how long the try was and how big the scrum was, but you cannot beat, I honestly say, and I may be very, very biased here, but But I just think that rugby union football is the greatest sport in the world for meeting friends. And I don't mean friends in Wales, I mean friends from all over the world. I've been in airports or in a bar my own, and I've looked at somebody and he said, hello, and I like rugby. And all of a sudden, you've made another friend. And I think the bond and camaraderie is, exceptional. And, we're very lucky to be part of a great game. And I'm very lucky still to be president of the club where I played all my life, the Scarlets. We've got a huge match tomorrow night against our neighbours, the Ospreys. It'll be a packed house, there'll be passion there, and to be part of that is still a wonderful feeling. I can't wait for tomorrow night under the floodlights at our new ground, Park of Scarlets, to play the Ospreys. So it is a great game for bonding and meeting friends.
Phil, before we let you go, I just want to ask you your feelings on where you think Welsh rugby is at the moment. Obviously, us in South Africa, we have our opinions of where we'd like it to be. But, you guys didn't have a bad World Cup last year, and you guys almost claimed a Six Nations title. Where are you happy with the state of Welsh rugby? Are you positive about it?
I'm very, very happy, very positive about Welsh rugby. We've got some wonderful young players coming through. I mean, we pushed everybody all the way to the World Cup semi-final. We had Sam Warburton sent off for the spear tackle, which affected the game dramatically. We've just come back from Australia. We went out there for 3 games. I think we were absolutely on our knees. We lost the series 3-0. Should have won the 3 games. And I think that's a lesson that these young men have to sort of learn, is they can play very well, and the performance is all very well and good, but you're always judged in your results. And I would rather sometimes see them win 9-6 by kicking 3 penalties than play glorious rugby and lose the game. I think at the moment, to be quite honest, at the very top of New Zealand, South Africa, and perhaps Australia, the top 3. But we are very much behind them. We won the Grand Slam again last year, and it'll be very interesting. We play the autumn series against Samoa, Argentina, New Zealand, and Australia. And let's see how we get on against, I call them the first division, the big boys down there. But hey, we are coming through. We've got some wonderful young talent, and I'm very, very excited about the future of Welsh rugby.
Phil, just wanted to go back very briefly to 1974 when I was 16 years of age, very impressionable, of course, and watched you play at the Buddha Erasmus Stadium in Port Elizabeth. And wow, people were talking about the Call 99. Now, this was something quite unique and something that was almost synonymous with British Lions rugby. Can you just explain exactly to the listeners and viewers who didn't really know what that was all about? You mentioned fighting for a test cap, but fighting of a different kind. Yes.
Well, the story goes, and I don't know, that Willie John is frightened stiff of where we played a game before the test match the week before. If there's any fighting with South African referees, that a player would get sent off if he fought one man on his own or retaliated, isn't it? So the story goes that when Willie shouted 99, that we were all to pile in as a team and get stuck into wherever we were playing. I think I put my hand up and asked did the backs have to join in the fight, because I was about 10 stone 2 and a real coward, But yeah. No, I think Willie's, he can get exaggerated, and But what we did in the 3rd test, which was a brutal test, to be honest, to clinch the series, there were lots of fights there, and I think if one had fought against one, people could have get sent off. But one is about 16, and it's not a very nice or a pretty sight. All scrapping and throwing punches, and 9 times out of 10, half the punches, they're not good boxers. They were missing the target and everything. But I think Willie's point and Sid Miller's point was they'd been to South Africa before, and they'd always become second best when it came to forward tussles and when it came to the physical side of it. In this tour, he was determined that we wouldn't take a step backwards, and we would get stuck in. But I must admit, I was always on the fringe if a big brawl took part, and I was just watching and admiring some guys trying to fight, and I'm a great boxing fan. I tell you what, they would have never made a boxer as long as they lived, but but it was tough times. But that's the way it had to go, and that's Willie's wish, and the boys carried it out,
Lovely.
Phil, we have to leave it there, unfortunately. It's been a fascinating chat, and we've really, really enjoyed catching up with you this afternoon on Bulls Visual Radio. Thank you so much for your time, and all the best for tomorrow night.
Well, it'll be a great night, and all the best to the people of South Africa. And give my best, please, to George Deuce from Westerhazen. We hear he's not very well. What a player, one of the great players I've ever seen play rugby.
Yes.
I just hope he gets better.
Yeah, well, actually, funny you should mention US Balls Visual Radio has been doing quite a lot of stuff with the J9 Foundation, US Foundation that he's set up to help people with motor neuron disease, and we actually did a live broadcast from a car dealership in Pretoria a week and a half ago, where they were giving cars to the J9 Foundation. So he is doing fantastic stuff.
A great man, a wonderful player. A credit to South Africa, credit to himself. Please give all of our best wishes here back home in Wales to that wonderful player and a wonderful man.
Phil Bennett, you're an absolute legend. Thank you very much for joining us here on Balls Visual Radio.
Yes, thank you very much. My pleasure.
Bye-bye. Here we go, Phil Bennett on Balls Visual Radio. What a nice guy. What a fascinating chat. You could just sit here all afternoon
and just listen to him.
And the way that he talks up and down like that, and you could just sort of strings you along. I thought it was really nice.
Oh, it's lovely.
Well, thanks, Johnny. Thanks for setting that up.
It was kind of different in a way, because we normally start with a big leading story, and I just thought something different.
And as a youngster, you learned something.
Yeah.
There you go. And he's optimistic about Welsh rugby. Of course, Wales winning the Six Nations this year. They could have won it last year, and they didn't have too bad a World Cup, and he believes that Welsh rugby is on the up. So that was a great chat.
2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mondays to Fridays, live on balls.co.za. Balls.co.za.